Michelle, if corruption is the name, then procurement is the game, according to Jabu Mabuza.
Absolutely, Kathy. Good afternoon to you and to our viewers as well. And those are the words directly from Eskom Board Chair Jabu Mabuza. It's been a very full morning since he began his testimony at 10 o'clock this morning. And let me bring our guests immediately. Sikonati Machancha is here with us, along with political analyst Karima Brown. Sikonati, let's start off with you. And I think perhaps one of the statements that stand out for me is that Jabu Mabuza says, quote, "We don't know where we are yet." And he's been in the job for just over a year.
That's correct. You have to look at it this way. The context is that just take the past 4 years. Day in, day out, crooks walking in there to do exactly that, to crook the system and do what they needed to do. You have got 220-something days, working days in a year, and they didn't sleep. So you come in, and you have other responsibilities. You have to do a forensic investigation. You have to find witnesses. You have to find the documents, and many documents were deliberately destroyed, of course.
But I also want to come in here, Michelle. I think it's really important to understand that the Eskom board thought that they had a financial crisis when they went in there. And what we're seeing now is that the crisis isn't just financial. The crisis is structural, because we've got plants that are almost 50 years old. We have got Kusile and Medupi that's not designed properly, and we need to find that out. So what is interesting is that the diagnostic has now been completed, and so now we know the full extent of what is actually happening at Eskom. And for that reason, certain specialists have been called. The minister, for example, said that they met with the Council of Engineers. They spoke to people who worked at Eskom, who are now working in places like Indonesia and so on, because you don't just have a situation of a financial crisis. Like Sikonati said, the bigwigs might be gone, but the layers of people who are part of state capture are actually still in Eskom. Eskom has more than 500 cases of misconduct that they are investigating. So it is a moving ship that must be turned around, and it's a very difficult thing to do. And we can criticize the board all we like, but the truth of the matter is that the board's task is much bigger than what was initially anticipated.
And they've gone through they've gone through already about 700 cases of disciplinary hearing over the past 12 months. So that's really the context, and they've exited or fired or retrenched about 17 executives. Many of them were implicated.
So you would say, even though he might face some criticism for admitting and actually getting a tongue lashing from Vincent Maleka for the Treasury report not being enacted fast enough, you're saying he's doing what he can at the moment outside of what the Treasury report ordered, which is for the Hawks to make arrests?
Michelle, I don't want to sound like I'm speaking for the board, but definitely these guys have come in, inherited a situation where there was no coal in about 20 stations. They have reduced that to 10 stations. There's maintenance backlogs which give us load shedding. They had to go around the world looking for cash to get into the business. They have indeed have to deal with the low-hanging fruit, and I'm talking about some of those executives who had to be dealt with immediately. You're talking about 17 executives at the top, but there are about 800 other 90 people below them immediately, and all of that within the space of a year. Now, if you remember the principle of fairness in a disciplinary hearing, you have to present proper evidence. You only do that after you have done a forensic investigation, gathered the evidence, find a neutral chairperson to judge the case. So the board and the management have done what they have done. Of course, not everything could be done in one go.
But I also want to add, Michelle, that Eskom can't arrest people. The Treasury report speaks specifically about law enforcement agencies that must do their jobs. So we need to get the Hawks on the channel to explain why they haven't acted. And remember, at that time, it was Bernie Nklemeza who was actually the head of the Hawks. And we've got to understand that the state capture of Eskom happened in the context of the capturing of a whole range of institutions. And one of the biggest institutions that were captured was the criminal justice system. We saw it with the NPA, with the Hawks, with the South African police. I mean, we had Khomotso Pahlane, who was the head of the police, who is now charged with corruption. So there was a state within a state. And I think that is what our viewers need to kind of understand. I don't think they must stop being impatient, but I think we need to also go to the proper people. The Treasury report, I just read it now, says specifically the Hawks needs to investigate person A, person B, person C. And we need to get to the Hawks and say, have you spoken to Machela Koko? Have you spoken to Brian Molefe? Why have you not put dockets in front of the NPA? Why has no one been charged? And we know Shamila Batoy is not even in her job for a month. And already we now have one person that has been suspended. And that was the person that was the connection between Nkomkobo Jiba and Lawrence Mrwebe. So I think that what we need to realize here is that these institutions can, like Sikonazi said, do the civil part of the work. They can retrench, they can discipline, but they also can't skip processes because they will be taken to the CCMA and so on. But the law enforcement part is the questions that we must ask to the law enforcement. The Eskom board cannot actually arrest people for doing that. They don't have the power to do that.
On that part, Michelle, exactly where the Hawks not willing or not being able to do their job. Go back 3 years. PRASA, chaired at that point by Popo Molefe, conducted a forensic investigation and pointed many fingers at the executive, including Lucky Montana. And they placed the docket in front of the Hawks and said, here's all the evidence, it's backed up by all this forensic investigation, go charge the people. When Bernie Nklemeza, at the head of the Hawks at the time, did not do the job, PRASA went to court and obtained an interdict against him, forcing him to charge, to act on the evidence that was presented on behalf of the Hawks. To this day, nobody for that case at PRASA has been charged. Forget Transnet, forget Eskom, forget SABC, forget South African Airways.
I mean, we're looking at a stage where if we get to the point where the Hawks actually does get itself, for lack of a better word, itself into gear, these arrests are going to come in thick and fast. I mean, the prima facie evidence is there.
The matter of arrests really is the easiest, but the biggest part is prosecution. Successfully prosecuting someone and locking them away, that is the difficult part. Now, in the case of all these crimes, treason, by the way, we're talking about 4 or 5 years now of the newest cases, and nothing has happened. You know what happens to evidence? It gets destroyed. Witnesses die. One prominent gentleman, unfortunately from Eskom, passed on after submitting his evidence to this commission. His soul rest in peace. He will never have the opportunity to back that up with anything.
And I think also, Michelle, if you look, for example, at the VBS case, we've just had political killings, 2 people, 2 whistleblowers, actually being shot and killed. And still we have no arrests in that case. And we have a forensic report again. So I think the questions really need to be posed to the criminal justice system. I think our Justice Minister, our Minister of Police, and of course the people that do the work, the actual administrators, they need to begin to answer. My interviews with the Hawks always goes like this. So how many people are you talking about? No, we are not able to speak with you because we're at a sensitive stage of the investigation. But South Africans have not seen a single arrest. Instead, what they have seen is the Hawks, the NPA withdrawing charges provisionally from Duduzane Zuma, for example. And of course also the asset forfeiture unit, losing the case in Estina. So I think there is...
Giving away the case in Estina.
Well, giving away the case in Estina. So I think what needs to be focused on, and when we do the unpacking of what happened at Eskom, we need to look at why our law enforcement agencies are not doing the work that they are doing. I think increasingly South Africans must ask, why are people not being charged? Why are they not being arrested? Because every day that passes gives people the opportunity to shred documents, to get rid of people, and the political killings are actually increasing. Whistleblowers are under attack, and I think that is something that needs to worry everyone. If we remember the former public protector, she said when a case goes cold, the evidence disappear, phone records and all of that disappear, and that makes taking things to court even more difficult. So I think it's really, really critical that we need to begin to ask the prosecution side of all of these things need to happen, because the impression that is being created is that there's commission after commission, there's board after board, but nothing happens and nothing changes. And I think there is a particular link in this chain that needs to be asked the tough questions, and that's the criminal justice system.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the people that have been, that will be implicated in Jabu Mabuza's testimony. At the start of this, we heard Advocate Vincent Maleka naming 8 people, among them the likes of Matela Koko, Anoj Singh, Suzanne Daniels. I want to just talk to you about perhaps the brazenness with which corruption takes place in the first place, and the brazenness in which people behave in the aftermath. I want to take us back to yesterday's special debate in Parliament on Eskom. Some scathing remarks being made against Matela Koko, the fact that he is open on social media about his supposed role as a now energy expert, what Eskom should be doing to turn things around at the power utility. We saw Zukisa Rentau really giving it to him, saying exactly what right do you have to behave in this manner given the allegations against you. But Sikonati, what goes through someone's mind, someone like Matela Koko?
You would have to ask that question to a thief, what goes through their mind. I wouldn't know. What I do take issue with is us in the media, particularly you guys on your radio stations and your TV stations, giving credibility to people like Matela Koko, Brian Molefe, knowing fully well that they are the real cause of this situation, and there's no remorse whatsoever. They stand up and shout at the loudest, rebranding themselves as experts. What they really are, they are suspects in a crime, or in crimes of treason, commercial crimes. The Guptas are sitting comfortably in Dubai with hundreds of billions of monies that belong to the people of South Africa. I'm not saying Brian Molefe and Matela Koko have a lot to answer for in those. In addition, treason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we think about the centrality of Eskom to our country's very survival.
I think if one looks at someone like Matela Koko lives in a world where he believes that he is above the law. And that was precisely what state capture created. It gave people the impunity to do things that they wanted to do. We have ministers, for example, who have shared state secrets with private individuals that are walking free, that sits on the highest bodies of the governing party. What we need is the law enforcement agencies to actually begin to do their work. I think the pressure really needs to be put on them, because what this state has done, and you have to commend them. I mean, the president, when he was appointed, sacked 10 cabinet ministers. He appointed different heads in all the police departments. He used, civil society to guide him to appoint certain people so that these appointments aren't political. And that is as much as he can do, because he can't interfere with the criminal prosecutions. I mean, that is the basis of Jacob Zuma's attempt now to have a stay of execution in his case, because the politicians interfered. But I think that we do as a country have an obligation to hold our law enforcement, coat to battery of people accountable. We need the head of the Hawks, we need the head of SAPS, we need the police, we need the Justice Minister to answer very, very specific questions. Why is Matsela Koko walking around able to engage in a debate as if he is not responsible for the mess that Eskom is in? Anoj Singh, exactly the same thing. Remember, he promised us that he was going to give us a list of all the gifts that he had received. And when he went to Parliament, he basically just lied to Parliament. And that is what Zuki Saranto was trying to say yesterday. The parliamentary process was being taken for a joke. It is rendered useless. And what this does is that it brings about fatigue among the South African public. People basically tell you, you know, is anyone really going to go to jail? Is anyone really going to pay for this? And the danger of that is that there is a chasm that is growing between ordinary people and our political establishment. And in a country where you have the kind of inequality that we have, where we constantly have to bargain with each other and trade off for how we can develop our country, that is a huge crisis. Because if people disengage, they get involved in populism, they follow people who promise things that simply cannot happen, that is not affordable. You have the rise of fascism. So I think we really need to begin to put the screws on our law enforcement agencies. They've had long enough time now. Like Stikonati said, in the case of Prasa, firstly the Hawks said they had no forensic capacity, and that is why workmen were actually asked to do the work that the Hawks were supposed to do. And then when they presented it, they had to go to court to get the Hawks to exercise their constitutional obligations. And that's the kind of state that we have lived in. That is the background against which we must look at the cleanup that is now happening. So for me, the big question is, what are the law enforcement agencies doing? They owe us an explanation. And even if these are sensitive matters, they've got to find the messaging to indicate to the South African public that they are actually going after the thieves. They are actually going after the people that stand accused, because the commissions have come to their conclusions in the SABC, in the case of Eskom, and these people just continue. There's one other point I want to make also. We concentrate on the big wigs, but I spoke to an investigative reporter, Mr. Carl Cohen, last night from Media 24, and he said there's people in the system that don't have big titles, but they are part of the patronage network. The flow of information comes past their desks, and it's that coterie of people that are still in those institutions, and that's why people who are involved in state capture can organize a coordinated fight back.
And you're talking about the likes of Jackie Lupinka.
Precisely. Yeah. She had access to every single document that was in the NPA. And I think that layer of people we need to be looking for, because that's the people that allow the Matsela Kokos to speak on Twitter with the kind of brazenness that he is speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Sikonati, one last comment from you. I'm getting a lot of pressure here to wrap
you've
up.
Got, the advocate here mentioned only 8 people.
Yeah.
There's a lawyer of general managers below them. These are the people who actually executed this, the chief procurement officer, the junior legal officers, the managers that reported to the 8 people that were mentioned here. They are still at Eskom. They have their own tracks to cover up.
Yeah, absolutely. Those 8
and
people,
they are still loyal to the
just the tip
accused.
of the iceberg. Thanks very much to both of you. I have the feeling that we can go on for the next hour or so here, but we leave it there for now. Our analysts here at the State Capture Inquiry, Karima Brown and Sikonati Machancha. That's as Jabu Mabuza continues his testimony. This is the first day. He's set to testify today and Monday as well. And I think we've only just scraped the tip of the iceberg when it comes to exactly what situation he found at the power utility, he and the new board, when they were appointed in January of 2018. Kathy, it's back to you in studio.